Pender County Board of Adjustments meeting to order for Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. We have all 5 members in attendance this morning, so that's great. We will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a brief 30-second remain standing for 30 seconds. We appreciate it. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we have an agenda in front of us. We need to adopt the agenda. Do I have any changes or anything to the agenda? Otherwise, I'll look for a motion.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
All right, have a motion, have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, minutes from our February 15th, 2023 meeting are next. Have we had a chance to read them? Any changes or modifications necessary to the minutes from our February meeting?
I didn't see anything that needed to be modified. I think it captured the conversation pretty accurately. And then since it's been withdrawn, that's the only change.
Right, yeah. All right, you make a motion then to accept the minutes?
Yeah, any other comments or no?
Any other comments?
Make a motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed? All right, minutes are official. Any public comment not related to our appeal? Anyone signed up?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll get into it. Appeal 2023-10, appeal of an administrative decision. Daniel, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good morning. So the case before you this morning is an appeal of an administrative decision. Mr. Samuel Potter is the applicant on behalf of Carl Meeks, LLC, who's the owner of the property. And they're requesting an appeal of an administrative decision made by the Pender County Planning and Community Development Department in the issuance of a final notice of violation. And that notice of violation case number is ZCV512. And that notice of violation was issued for the operation of a commercial motocross track without a special use permit in a zoning district that requires a special use permit for said land use. So I just want to get everybody oriented with the property here. It's about 52 acres is the large tract here. And then right here is a 5-acre tract with a single family home. Excuse me. So Shaw Highway runs north to south between NC Highway 210 and NC 53, which is on the east side of the property here. This is Carl Meeks Road. Property's north of Carl Meeks Road. And then further west down Carl Meeks Road is the Holly Shelter Estates community, which basically abuts the northeast Cape Fear River. So Carl Meeks Road essentially runs from Shaw Highway west to the northeast Cape Fear River. So I want to go through some case history for the board, talk about where this case started and how we got to this point. And please feel free to ask questions at any time. This is establishing some timeline and how we got to this point. So on July 6, 2022, code enforcement staff Charlie Ring, who's in the audience, received his first complaint about this situation. A neighbor called and said that there were issues with dust being stirred up by 4-wheelers and ATVs and dirt bikes riding on the subject property, and that it was being used for commercial purposes. Excuse me. On July 8th, Charlie Ring, code enforcement staff, visited the site, conducted what we call a code enforcement site visit, and did not notice anybody riding dirt bikes or ATVs at the site. However, after that site visit, staff located a website for a Copperhead MX motocross club online and found that there was essentially a club where folks were being charged or could pay to join the club to come ride at this site. So on August 29th, staff issued a first notice of violation to the property owner. And the content of that notice of violation was that the owner had failed to obtain zoning approval prior to operating a commercial motocross racetrack as defined under NAICS code 711212, and NAICS stands for North American Industry Classification System. So I want to take a quick moment to read through the documentation that was included in that first notice of violation. It refers to Article 3.2.1 of the Pender County UDO, which reads as follows. Activities for which zoning approval is required. Valid zoning approval shall be required for any application for a building or electrical permit. No building or electrical permit shall be issued for any activity in a zoned area until such zoning approval or a written determination by the administrator that no approval is required has been issued. Zoning approvals may be issued in the form of an individual permit or as a corresponding approval on a related form such as a building permit. In all circumstances, a zoning approval shall be required for the following activities: to commence the excavation for or the construction of any building or other structures, including accessory structures, to commence the moving, exterior alteration, expansion, or substantial repair of any structure, including accessory structures, to initiate a new use or change the use of any land, lot, parcel, or property, or to initiate a new use or change the use for any building, including accessory structures. So from July 6th to August 29th, 2022, this is where this case had progressed. Staff issued a first notice of violation in accordance with the procedures outlined in Article 13 of the UDO, which is where code enforcement procedures are located, and said there was a violation of Article 3.2.1 of the UDO. You can see here, this is a snip or a screenshot from the table of permitted uses within the UDO. Subject property is zoned RA, rural agricultural. And the NAICS code that we referenced in the notice of violation, 711212, falls under 7112, requires a special use permit. So after that notice of violation was issued on August 29th, staff was informed that the operations of this motocross club would cease. The website would be removed, the motocross website would be removed. They would no longer charge folks to join the club to ride on the property. Staff notified the applicant and the owner that if they wanted to continue with that use, they would need to apply for a special use permit prior to continuing. On January 7th, so at that time, I should back up one moment. At that time, staff considered the case closed. Staff was under the impression that the matter was resolved. Then on January 17th, some neighbors came to the Board of Commissioners meeting, which was located in Hampstead, and addressed the board during public comment and expressed some of the same concerns that were originally expressed to code enforcement staff back in July of 2022. Then on January 18th and January 19th, staff further investigated the situation after follow-up conversations with the folks who spoke to the Board of Commissioners during public comment, and located a website under the homepage Driven MX that offered training opportunities at 532 Carl Meeks Road in Rocky Point. And as you can see from the snip on the website here, it discusses training with Driven MX at a private location with some of the amenities at the site. 3 motocross tracks, barn for storage and bike work, freshwater ponds, floating docks, etc. And then it goes on to describe the training program and list dates, as well as cost to reserve time to train at the facility during those dates. So on January 19th, staff issued a final notice of violation under the determination that this was a commercial use operating on subject property without a special use permit, right, without zoning approval. On February 17th, an appeal of administrative decision was filed with the county, and that's how we got to where we are now. So it was staff's determination, staff's conclusion that based on the evidence, I, as the zoning administrator, found that the property is being used as an unpermitted commercial racetrack without a special use permit, right? It's unpermitted use. In the Pender County UDO, I thought this was provided some valid context. The Pender County UDO defines commercial outdoor recreation as private, fee-supported outdoor facilities used for athletic, training, recreational, or park purposes that utilizes supervised athletic or recreational activities. And then this is just a slide I'll leave up. This is from the UDO. It discusses the action by the Board of Adjustment in the case of an administrative appeal, or an appeal of administrative decision, excuse me. I'm happy to answer. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions for the board. The staff report further lays out everything that I've gone over in the presentation, but yes, I'm happy to answer any questions for the board.
Let me, before
Mr.
we.
Chairman, I'm sorry. If he's gonna answer questions, he'll need to be put under
We'll start
oath.
that,
Right,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
he can certify the record separately, which is basically what he's done, but to answer questions, he would need to be under
Right,
oath.
let's start that process before we actually begin formal testimony.
Yes, sir.
It's important here for everyone to understand some facts related to this meeting. This is known as a quasi-judicial proceeding, which means it functions much like a court, where one's individual rights are being determined. Only persons who can demonstrate that they will be affected by the outcome of the decision are allowed to participate as parties in the proceeding. Testimony will be limited to only those issues concerning whether the variance or appeal application should be granted, modified, or denied under the Unified Development Ordinance and state statute. Persons providing testimony shall have standing in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 160D-1402. The purpose of the hearing is to gather relative evidence so that we can make a decision that's fair to the applicant, neighbors, and community with respect to the procedures and standards established in the UDO and North Carolina General Statute. Are there any board members here who feel like they can sit and make an impartial decision on today's proceeding? Okay, if not, we'll proceed. Anyone who's going to be testifying this morning, I'd like to go ahead and have them stand up, raise your right hand, and be sworn in. And Trey, would you take care of that for me, please?
Certainly. Y'all, excuse me, you swear and affirm that the testimony you give this morning shall be the truth, nothing but. And for the record, Mr. Potter is here representing the applicant as an officer of the court. He does not need to be sworn in to participate in the proceeding.
Understood. Thank you, Trey, very much. All right, questions for Daniel as we get started?
Maybe just a question for the attorney.
Certainly.
Just going back to the timeline and the actions taken by staff, if we can address the initial notice of violation and then how that applies to the applicant's appeal rights, seeing that this took place last year.
It is certainly our position. It does not affect the appeal rights. And again, as Mr. Adams indicated, they said, okay, we're not doing that. And and if I may, Mr. Chairman, go into that, and for the members of the audience, we do not regulate people riding dirt bikes unless it is a business activity or ATVs or whatever it is. If you want to go on your own property and ride a dirt bike 24 hours a day, subject to the noise ordinance, which kicks in at 11 p.m. and goes until half an hour before sunrise, I'm sorry, you can. We don't regulate. The only regulation for that would be, if it's as long as it's not a commercial activity, the only regulation would be our noise ordinance, which is enforced not through zoning, but through the sheriff's department, getting calls and going out and addressing unreasonable noise in the protected hours. So that was closed and it was done differently. And also, again, so everybody knows, we do not regulate short-term rentals.
Right.
So if someone goes through Airbnb, we don't regulate that.
Mm-hmm.
And if The staff position on that was basically, if you're using an amenity of an Airbnb, if it's a swimming pool, if it's a lake, if it's whatever it is, as long as it's ancillary to the rental of the house, you know, we've got short-term rentals obviously all over the county. And, you know, some of them may border on the waterway or have access to, you can put your boat in, or, you know, whatever else it is. We don't regulate short-term rentals, and unless it is, you are being charged a fee. And the reason that came up with this, it was a group out of Ohio that had leased the property from the applicant, as far as we could tell. And then you could pay per day, this group in Ohio, to use just the trails and the facility.
That was the Copperhead Club, that you joined the club and paid a fee to use the trails, even if you weren't renting?
No, that was the previous one. This was, it was on the slide, BMX. or
Right,
BMX, yeah.
it's my understanding that there's kind of been an evolution. It started off as a club where folks could pay a fee to come and ride. That was quashed, and then
Right,
it
but
evolved
you
to.
didn't have to rent the house to ride. You
That
were
was
just a
my
member of the club.
that's my understanding.
Right, and that is the distinction of, if you're renting the house, and then there are ancillary, you know, amenities there, then okay, just like anybody, again, just like you
Okay.
Airbnb and you're in a house with a
So
pool.
there's not a specific
Right.
fee being paid for the purpose of using the facility outside of the
Right,
house itself?
if you had a swimming pool, which you had to join,
Or
and you paid a
basketball
fee
court
to,
or
right,
pickleball
whatever.
court or
But,
whatever.
yeah, if you rent the house and there's a swimming pool in the backyard,
use it.
you can use it, and that's fine. And so, this is a different use, but it is similar in that it's,
Understood.
and that, you know, you can rent the Airbnb and never set foot on those trails if you want to.
Okay,
But if they were charging, then that's the, you know, if I'm getting charged daily to go use it
charge
and not,
extra for that amenity.
right, then
That's a
yes.
violation.
Or again, you're not staying at the house.
I understand, you're
Okay.
using it without staying at the house.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Adams, if it.
No, it's
no,
okay,
thanks.
no, it's a good answer. Good question, good answer. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Adams?
I just have a question on the interpretation of the table of permitted uses. Where you're referencing the NICS code of 7112, however, in the application, or at least in the appeal, they're stating that the primary use is as an Airbnb, and as the attorney stated, that's not within, and this is an ancillary use with the motocross. But my understanding with table of permissible uses is that the most intensive usage of the property is what we fall back on whether it's permitted or a special use permit. So is that correct, or do we just on what the primary use is, here being an Airbnb, or because the most intense type of commercial output of that is the motocross? So I'm just trying to figure in my head how I'm interpreting.
Sure. If I may, and I don't think I adequately explained this the first time around, so please forgive me. So the case started out as a club to come and ride your dirt bike, and that was in 2022, in the summer of 2022. That was subsequently stopped. Staff was under the impression that the case was closed. Then when the complaint was brought back up, staff came to the understanding that the property was being leased to a company who specifically trains folks to drive dirt bikes, you know, improve their dirt bike skills. And so a lease was issued, is our understanding. A lease was executed between the owner of the property and Driven MX to do training on the property, not through Airbnb, outside of Airbnb. So does that kind of clarify? So Driven MX is a commercial entity that trains folks in riding dirt bikes.
But they can only train people who are renting the house?
Now that I don't know. They were leasing the property to hold training sessions with folks who are trying to improve their dirt bike skills, is my understanding.
So
Now,
under zoning, what is the primary use of this property?
It's
for the
zoned for
violation?
residential.
Yeah, it's rural agriculture,
Rural
right?
agriculture.
Right.
Yeah, all right. So, but are we considering this property and the violation from being a commercial rental that's being rented out through Airbnb, or because of the activity with the motocross being associated with it. Does that
Separate.
still proceed?
Separate. We're looking at this as, there's a property that's zoned for residential use. The owner has leased the property to a commercial entity for commercial activity.
Okay,
Completely separate from Airbnb.
okay.
I think they also use the property for Airbnb. So I think they also use it for Airbnb, and then they lease it
So
certain days as
the
well.
crux of the matter is who the Airbnb is renting to and which activities they are under, I don't know, I wouldn't want to say permitted, but the activities that they're, yeah, the commercial activities that are happening at that site.
The applicant may be able to speak better
Okay.
to the relationship with Airbnb and some of the leasing than I can. I'm not as involved in that process.
But,
Okay.
but the activities being changing the use from
Residential.
single-family residential to the 7112 classification.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there
Yeah.
and get clarification prior to getting
Changing of
testimony
use without permit.
Yeah.
Right.
on
Well,
what
and-
we're looking at as well as what should be spoken to.
And, I mean, there are a lot of examples. Let's say, you know, there are people that put in batting cages for their kids to work on the hitting. Well, if it's just, you know, your kid or the neighborhood kids and you're not charging anybody, that's fine. If then you start charging somebody to come in, that makes it commercial, and that's the issue and the violation here, and Daniel, I mean, but is it, this was a commercial activity, not that it was going on. You know, again, I mean, you can, that kind of thing, I mean, there are all sorts of things that it's when you change it into, you know, again, the training and the commercial it was a commercial aspect of it that was there. So that's the basis of the violation, that's the issue before the board is, was it commercial? And, you know, is commercial then not permitted without an SUP? So,
And it's not whether or not the property owner is undergoing those commercial activities, it's whether or not those activities are happening on the property, which falls back to the property owner.
For commercial.
well, if it's
Right.
commercial use, but,
Yeah.
I mean, right, I mean, because if I rent a house, you know, again, for the residential use, and there are ancillary uses out there, I mean, that's then that's, you know, okay. And again, you know, whatever it is, you know, a pool, you know, a basketball court, I mean, whatever.
Or a barber shop, running a bar.
Well, I mean, that's straight
Yeah.
commercial, and so that's the key is, you know, and again, because we don't regulate short-term residential rental.
Okay. No, I'm
Well,
clear.
barbershop, if free haircuts came with the rental, I guess
Yeah,
you would get free haircut.
Yeah.
but
I
it looked
think
like
we
mine.
should go
so
ahead
good.
and, I think we should go ahead and hear from the appellant and understand what their argument is, from them directly.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Adams while he's up? All right, thank you, Daniel, appreciate it. All right, I assume the attorney will speak for the. Would you please state your name and affiliation for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Sam Potter. I'm an attorney from Wilmington, North Carolina. I represent the I represent the property owner. I have with me today Tom Clifford, who's closest to me in the yellow polo shirt, Aaron Hoxton, who is Chad Hodgson's wife, who's the two people sitting next to Tom. Mr. Thurman, if it's okay with you, I just wanted to ask Daniel sort of a question or two.
Absolutely.
Mr. Adams, you have no evidence that there's any current commercial activity going on at the subject property, is that right?
As far as at present time, correct.
Other than the time periods within which Driven MX was operating on the property, say since October 1st of 2022, are you aware of any other commercial activity being performed on the property?
I had received information from one of the adjacent property owners that there was a planned race, more like a 5K, right? Not a race with motorized vehicles, but a running race. But it's my understanding that that never occurred or never took place.
So other than the time period that Driven MX was on the property, you understand there may have been a plan to run a running race, not a motorized race, is that right?
And I'm not sure I can testify that it was while Driven MX was on the property at some point between when this process started and today. I was my understanding that there had been a scheduled running race.
And do you have any evidence that the folks that rented through Driven MX were not also staying at the subject property?
I do not.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, as I said earlier, I represent the property owner, and this is a quasi-judicial hearing, so of course anything I say is not evidence. I have Tom Clifford here to kind of answer questions and speak on the record under oath about the use of the property and the history. Just as a general outline, when Travis Henley was still the planning director, he and I are who communicated back in the late summer and early fall of 2022. And when Travis explained that the property could be used as an Airbnb, but could not be used as a separate commercial operation, they immediately shut it down, took the website down, stopped doing it. We don't intend to violate the Pender County ordinances. They then began doing this Airbnb rental thing where they're renting out to anybody who wanted to come stay. Driven MX was a slight difference because there was a separate lease related to them. But as far as, and you'll hear this from Mr. Clifford here in a minute, as far as they knew, the people coming were coming from Ohio in the winter because it's cold there to stay at the property for a week or two to train. And my understanding is, and again, Mr. Clifford is going to testify as to this here in a second, that the people who were staying with Driven MX were actually staying at the property and training there. But in any event, without babbling too much, I'll turn it over to Mr. Clifford so that you can get some testimony under oath about the use of the property.
Thanks, sir, very much.
Thank you.
Sir, please state your name and address for the record.
Thomas Clifford, 513 Bayfield Drive, Wilmington, North Carolina, 28411.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me here. Thanks, Chairman and Board. I'm here to answer any questions. Basically, the timeline here is exactly how it was laid out on the appeal and description. We had copper at mx.com. The minute we got the county letter, we seized the website. The fees that we were charging were really just to upkeep and just pay for minor things like just to keep the property up a little bit. And it was mainly our friends. That was basically who we were having riding out there. But we then told all our friends, you can't ride out here anymore. You can't do this. So we closed the website down, and as stated, we then began Airbnb-ing the property. Families coming from the Northeast, the Midwest, some Virginia, North Carolina, to come to the South where it was warm. They could stay at the beach. They could stay at the house and go to the beach. They could use the amenities on the property. We also have other amenities such as fishing and ATV riding. It's a lot of fun out there, of course. So it became popular, and we enjoyed having them. But it was only people staying at the property that were using the amenities at the property from that point forward. Driven MX came, as in any other rental company that, or not rental, but renter that came. They used the property as anybody else would, and anybody staying at the property was riding at the property or using the amenities of the property. I wasn't aware of anything else Driven MX was doing outside using the property as any Airbnb property had used it. So I'm here to answer any questions and anything you guys might have that's confusing.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, to your knowledge, no one else other than people renting the house used the tracks?
To my knowledge, it was only the Driven MX people who signed the lease that were using the track.
And they were managing everyone who came in and out of the house or used the track. Was it their responsibility to do that as part of the lease?
Correct.
Okay. So if any use of the track was occurring without their knowledge, that would basically be like trespassing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, but are you saying that the Driven MX folks are not using the property, regardless of how they're leasing it from you, as a commercial use when they're charging folks for instruction motorbike driving?
I didn't get into their business on how they were managing like Driven MX. Honestly, I didn't even know it was called Driven MX until the county sent us a letter saying Driven MX was from Ohio, because I rent other property in Pender County for, like, I put on races in Wilmington, so I just kind of use it as the same kind of thing.
So you're not interested in what they use it for? You're saying basically you're just renting it out to them, and if they use it for a commercial use, that's on them?
Correct. At the time, at this point forward, knowing the issue, we would now vet anybody that's going to Airbnb or rent the property. You know, we would make sure that they weren't using it for anything other than using the amenities on the property. If they were a commercial company or, you know, training, coaching business, we would not rent the properties for that.
So this Driven MX is no longer renting the property?
No, sir.
So now it's strictly, you rent through Airbnb and you get to use the amenities of the property?
That's correct.
No other leasing or entity, MX, Copperhead, that's all out of the equation. Now you go to Airbnb, you find the property, you rent it, and you have use of the facilities, whatever comes with it.
That's correct.
Do you mentioned that you have additional rental properties that you rent that presumably don't have motocross tracks on it. Do you have insurance on this current property for the rental?
For this property?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you have additional riders on this property for anything else besides just the house?
We don't have additional riders anymore, so.
Anymore? Did you?
Do you, and let me be, just, sorry, let me play lawyer. You mean rider, insurance rider?
Insurance rider.
Yeah,
Insurance
okay,
rider.
because I think he was responding as if they were talking bike riders. You're
No,
talking
I'm talking
insurance
insurance rider, additional insurance riders outside of just for the house and for renting of the house.
We
So on
have,
the
we
property.
have normal insurance policy on the house, and then we have Airbnb insurance.
Okay, so nothing additional for the property.
Well, we have coverage for our property, our normal insurance policy that we have to have to own a property, but it doesn't have additional coverage for anything specific.
So riders are at their own risk, basically.
Yeah, well, just for trying to see if there was additional, as you stated, that you guys didn't know what was happening on the property. If I knew that.
We
there
didn't
was
go
gonna
out
be a-
and we didn't go out and request rider insurance as a commercial track would do. They would probably get insurance for commercial riding. We do not have that
Okay.
because we're not a commercial track.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
And and it's page 14, it's the Driven MX, at the last sentence on 14, from Driven MX, says 3 motocross courses must sign waiver prior to riding. So they were getting a waiver, and again, because and I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah,
They
I was just
they were
getting to-
doing it, but the owner of the property wasn't, because they weren't having daily riders out there. That
Do
wasn't,
you,
they weren't doing it.
Do you have some
Just get
kind of
it down.
general rules and regulations you provide tenants as it relates to use of the tracks?
We do.
Do you have those, or those,
I do not have them with me now.
okay, they're not part of the packet?
But just like any other property amenity, you
Right.
would have to check off that if you go step in a sand hole or drown in the pond, we're not
Sure.
liable.
But do you have like, the times that they can use the track, are there those kind of considerations?
We have posted for the privacy of the neighbors that people should not ride beyond the hours of 10 a.m. and 5 p.m.
So the riding takes place from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Within those hours, it can take place, but it doesn't take place from 10 to 5. It just can only take place. We recommend to our tenants they can only use ATV and any kind of vehicles that they bring to the property from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Okay, but your recommendation is not necessarily their requirement. They can ride whenever they want to.
You can't make anybody do anything, but,
I
right,
understand.
so,
I'm just-
yeah. But yes,
Your intent was to try to keep them to a
Correct.
7-hour riding window.
that's correct. And if we hear from anything that they're riding outside those hours, we immediately message the tenants and say, please stop.
Okay. And if I, Mr. Thurman, other than making too much noise or going beyond 11 PM from a county perspective, that's not our issue.
Correct. That's again, I mean, we don't.
I understand.
Yeah, if you've got property, you can go ride your,
I understand. I
ride
just
your
want
bike
to
on
make
it.
sure
yeah.
that I understand the difference. Any other questions?
What was the rate per night that was being charged of Driven MX?
Oh, I want to say it was $2,000 to $3,000 for the week. So, somewhere in that range.
You have, I mean, I looked it up, it is on Airbnb. I mean, $613 a night,
Right, yeah, so.
and average Rocky Point properties are going for about $150 a night, if that's any relevancy, but,
I don't believe it's that. I think it's $435 a night, possibly.
I mean,
So-
this is,
If it's 600 and some, it might be. I don't know. It might be. I was under the assumption it was 435, but that's
Yeah.
moot point. Moot point.
regardless, yeah, I mean, it just flexibility, June
Sure.
29th to July 5th, so.
Okay. Yeah.
But,
That'd be July 4th weekend, so that
Yeah,
might be.
That's a holiday weekend.
Yeah.
too, right?
So am I understanding then that really the appellant's position is that this appeal is moot because we were using this, renting it out to someone using it for commercial use, and we no longer are doing that?
I believe that's the,
Well, again, I'll let Mr. Potter address that, and yeah, I think he may have something he's gonna suggest to the board later on after we get the full, let everybody have a chance to speak.
Well, okay.
Yeah, because Mr. Olson, that is kind of confusing on what the actual appeal is, on whether or not something, there was commercial operations that were about to happen or happening, or in
I think.
doing,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Well,
Daniel,
I'm just wondering, it sounds to me like we're talking about a case where an officer pulls you over for speeding and comes up to your window and says, you know how fast you're going, and you say, well, I'm parked right now, officer.
And-
I don't see any reason why we have this appeal or should rule on it unless, I haven't heard anything yet that suggests that there was anything wrong with the
Well, I think
notice that the
Daniel-
planning department sent out.
I think that, Daniel can speak to that. I think he believed it did, and that's how he issued his.
Yeah, the crux of the case, at least from my perspective, is that a commercial use was taking place on property that was zoned for residential. And so we issued a notice of violation. Now, whether or not they're still conducting that use, in my opinion, is sort of beside the point. And I just want to make the point here that on the Driven MX website, it lists January 2024 winter training at Copperhead Ranch. So there's at least some kernel of an idea that this use will proceed at some future date. It sounds like this is a time of year or seasonal use where folks who are in a colder environment want to come down to a warmer environment and train. Obviously, as it's warmed up with the spring weather, that use doesn't appear to be occurring anymore based on the testimony that we've heard. But that doesn't mean that it didn't occur at one time or won't occur at some future date.
And, Mr. Olson, the other part of this is to avoid the whack-a-mole issue that comes up sometimes, is you can seek enforcement and obtain an injunction that says you don't do it in the future. You know, it's not, okay, I'm not doing it right now, like you say. How fast am I going? Well, 0. But that doesn't change what had happened. And in this case, and there's also, we have provision in our ordinances, most do, like if somebody moves a carnival in, well, you can't give them 30 days notice and then their right of appeal, not, because they're, 3 states away by the time you've done that. So there are procedures for immediate type action. Not saying that we would take it here or not. I'm just saying that it's there. And so that's why I don't think it is moot in the sense of there could be still further enforcement, because they're saying it was wrong entirely. But again, there may be some ways to, try to address that, that we'll here later.
And that was my point of the question about the violation issued in 2022. You know, if we issued a notice of violation at that point and they say, we're not doing this, okay, violation goes away, doesn't that sort of get into this whack-a-mole sort of identification of what is going on or not going on this property?
It does, but again, it was, that, as far as we can tell, and as was addressed, I mean, it took down the website, that was over with. Now, the property owners still have the right to go out there and ride themselves.
Yeah.
But that it wasn't being operated as a club, well, then this was a separate issue. And again, it was felt then that we needed to proceed, and the option, the applicant made the determination to appeal. You know, because as you know, we seek compliance outside of anything else, just to get people in. And so, and I'm not saying they didn't stop that, but instead of just talking to Charlie and to Daniel and saying, okay, we agree we're not gonna rent to anybody that's doing training sessions, they appealed. And so that's why it's in front of you. It wasn't driven by the county.
Was there a monetary violation notice? Was there any?
There would be monetary, but the appeal stays the accrual of fines.
So was there any accrual to this point?
No.
No. So
They
it's just the,
they appealed within the time frame. They have
Okay.
30 days to appeal. They appealed within that. So it stays any other or the accrual of fines. And we had that discussion with Mr. Potter on that. And so, I mean, again, it wasn't a surprise they did. You know, we had communication, and, you know, everybody was professional, and, you know, that's just the way it proceeded.
All right, do you have anyone else that's gonna testify on your behalf at this point?
Quick question.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Mr. Clifford, how long was Driven MX on the property?
1 week, 3 times for 1 week, I believe.
3 weeks total.
3 weeks total. Okay.
Does y'all have any questions?
Any other questions?
Not right at the moment, thank you.
Okay. Happy to come up and answer any more if you need.
Thank you very much.
And then I wasn't gonna call Mr. Hogston up, but I'm going to just briefly to address something that Mr. Adams said about 2024 Driven MX. And Chad, if you come up for a second, please.
Thank you very much.
Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Chad Hogston, 8817 Tilbury Drive, Wilmington, North Carolina.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So the one issue I think was with regards to Driven MX's website, which shows a January 24 camp. That's getting the cart before the horse. I've actually already spoken with them, advised them they cannot return. So they've put that in their website on their own without advising us about that. But basically, the Driven MX tenant was here for a 3-week stint. They left for about 2 or 3 weeks, returned for a couple weeks thereafter. They run winter camps for kids, so these are little kids that train MX. But after this incident, we told them they can't return. So the 24 issue is a non-issue because they're not returning.
can you repeat the cumulative time that they were on?
I think about 5 weeks.
So 5 weeks.
I think it was 3 weeks on, a couple weeks off, and then they returned for 2 weeks.
Okay.
They were our longest tenant, for sure. Most of the time, 95% of our tenants are a mom and dad and the son and his buddy that stay for 3 or 4 days, and then they leave. So the frequency of riding is low, actually. So when we talked to the neighbors about this, because the neighbors took issue of it, when we originally bought the property, it was just us riding with friends. That's it. And then evolved in time. We had a club. Found out that that club is something we shouldn't have done, so we squelched that. And then we created an Airbnb. And part of that Airbnb was you can use the amenities. That included the tracks, the trails, okay? We're new to this too. And so it evolved from there, but we wanted to stay away from violating ordinances. Now this Driven MX company came along and wanted to run their winter camp there. So we talked to them and we said, okay, you can do it. So they came and did what they did. And then thereafter, we get the notice that that was a problem. We didn't know it was a problem at the time. We obviously do now. So we are trying to steer clear of anything that has anything to do with a commercial aspect of the property. So I have talked to Driven MX, told them this issue, and told them we are not gonna be able to do it again because we don't wanna run into the problem again. So basically, we would like to just continue the Airbnb with the standard folks, the families, the groups, et cetera, that don't act as a commercial unit to rent the property, just like 95% of them do. So that's what our intent is at this point.
So was Driven MX on site on January 17th to the 19th?
Were they on site?
Were they renting the property and running the 17th to the 19th?
I don't know particularly if they were there then or not. I'm guessing. That's a guess.
But in that second to third week in January, they were renters?
I believe so. I believe so. But I can tell you this too, is we want to be good neighbors. So we have always had our doors open to speak with them about their concerns. One of the big concerns, I think, was not so much that Chad, you and your son and buddies are riding bikes out there. That wasn't a big deal. The big deal was frequency, I think, of riding, okay? So we had agreed that post-May of '23, we were actually gonna cut our rentals in half to reduce the frequency of riding. This was done on our own volition for the neighbors. And that would reduce the frequency tremendously. So if you look at our calendar now for Airbnb, after this month, it plummets. We're only renting it twice a month, June, July, August, etc. I don't think we have any renters for July, August at all. So we're trying to be good neighbors, and we're also trying to comply with county ordinances. That's our intent. We're new to this, so we were kind of growing with it and trying to figure it out ourselves. So we don't want to be here, but we'll be here to answer any questions. And again, we're still open to talk to neighbors about anything.
Mhm.
The problem is you run into an aggravated neighbor, it's impossible to speak with them at that point. So we're here.
Mhm. Understood, appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, are there, I assume there's people who signed up to speak?
Are all the, obviously you have a chance to respond after Mr. Powder, but is that everybody you want to call at this point?
Yes, that's it for our initial appeal, the factual background of our appeal. And just to reiterate, I would say that Driven MX may be a commercial business, but there's no evidence at all that somebody was staying or using the tracks that wasn't actually staying in the property. That's the basis of our appeal. I don't know that that was clear, is that every bit of feedback we've gotten to date is that the problem is charging a fee for using the trails separate and apart from staying in the property. That being said, after the opposition makes their presentation, we have a proposal that we want to set forth to the board that we think can address many of the concerns. But we think lots of people here want to be heard, and they ought to be heard.
Certainly.
And then after they're heard.
I have one more question. How many square foot and how many bedrooms is the house?
3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1,800, what's the square footage? 1,800-ish square feet, and then they've got a barn and, as well.
Is there signage on the property that speaks to no trespassing or no illegal use?
There is. Yeah, they're nodding their heads, yes. I can't testify.
I understand.
can certainly put them on the stand back up here
Yeah,
if
no,
that's important to the record.
Yes.
Starting on page 16, there's some pictures of it.
Yes.
If it's important to the record as far as the board's concerned.
I just would like to know,
Sure.
what proactive things you've done to try to
Sure.
prevent illegal use.
So again, going back to, we've never done this before.
Mhm.
We started this out. Neighbors started contacting us about bikes off property,
Okay,
going down to other pieces of property, all that.
not necessarily knowing where the demarcation is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we created 10, 15, 20 signs that says, no MX bikes past here, right? And we put these at every point where they could possibly go over our property line onto other properties, okay? Now, did that immediately 100% stop everybody from doing it? No, of course. But it definitely stopped the majority of them. And we still have neighbors that contact us saying, hey, you got a bike over here. And we'll call the renters and say, how many signs have you not seen, right? And so we can only do so much. You know, at the end of the day, these people are adults and they do what they do. But I've advised the neighbors at this point, look, if you see somebody over there that's on a bike, call law enforcement, say they're trespassing, because we've done all that we can do. I've even at this point too put up barriers at any point of entry. So not only are you looking at a sign, you also have barriers. So good luck getting over that to go over to the other property. So we are doing everything that we can to keep people on property. We have it in our little book that you have in the property itself, laundry list of rules, and that is one of them. I think I think it's in bold actually. It's like we say, our neighbors are good people. They deserve to be respected. Respect them. Do not go on their property, etc. That type of thing. Also, we have signs everywhere that says writing hours, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we don't have to do that. The noise violation is 11 p.m. But we've decided to pare that down for the renters. And we've gotten multiple complaints from our renters saying, it's 95 degrees outside. Can't we ride at 6, 7 o'clock? I'm like, look, we've come up with an agreement here, and we want to adhere to it. So, doing everything that we can. So we've got signs everywhere.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I
All right.
appreciate it. Yes, sir. If we have people who've signed up to testify?
We do, Mr. Chairman. Bill McAbee?
Yes.
Please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay. Bill McAbee, 5053 Shaw Highway. I'm approximately 2,300 feet from where the jumps are on the tracks. Across the property, it's pretty wide open. I could actually stand on my property line on the easement with next property owner to the south and see the jumps, the riders on the jumps and so forth like that. I'm a disabled veteran. Majority of that, or partial to that, is PTS. I like peace and quiet. I don't get that. I bought my property out there before all of the motocross stuff was created for the peace and quiet. Got that, camped out there many times getting the property ready for development, and it's beautiful. Peace and quiet, loved it. Gonna be happy there. Not so much anymore. There was a statement that was made that the riders are, you know, right now, especially since the folks from up north left, that was only occasionally riding, a couple days a week. It's every day. Every day, and it was noisy. The other thing I want to address is the trespassing, out of control. Not just once or twice a week. The main reason I wanted to speak, because I'm out there all the time. I have a homestead. I see it. The other property owners aren't out there. I go out and run them off all the time. 5 times a week probably. The signs, they ignore them. We put our own signs up. We put our own gates, fences. They just move them. You know, things like that. And that's all I got to say.
Great. Thank you, sir, very much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Next,
Roy Harris?
state your name and record and address for the record, please.
My name is Roy Harris. I live at 531 Carl Meeks Road. I am the closest neighbor to this operation. And they have been telling you some stories that are not true. They have day riders that just come out there, park, get out, ride, load up, and leave the same day. So maybe they renting by the hour. I don't know. But I get this day in and day out. I live approximately 75 feet from the property line that they are on. They don't ride on that area where the people where there's a trailer. Now, these people come out there with mobile homes, stay 3 or 4 days. We had a night, this week, we had a mobile home, motor home. Well, maybe it was over the weekend. It was this week, though. Came out and pulled up in the back, and it ran its generator all night long so they would have air conditioning and stuff in there. Now, I hear that. I have a hearing problem. But loud noises like that just drive me crazy. My wife and I are both retired. We like to sit out on our front porch in the afternoon and sip a glass of wine and enjoy the birds and the animals that come up into our yard. With this operation over across the street, everything's leaving. They say that they have come and talked to the neighbors. I have never seen any of these people other than when they leave or come into the property, because their driveway is right across from my property. So they're telling you stuff to keep this operation open. Now, I don't know what we can do about it, but something needs to be done. If they I bought a property and built me a home out there in 2017. When we had the hurricane in 2018, I had my house flooded 3 feet deep, and I'm high above the river. I rebuilt because I liked the neighborhood. I liked the tranquility that I had. The other problem I have, which is it's because of the military aircraft that fly over my house. But I'm military, so I understand what they're doing.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
So
Appreciate
I
it.
beg you, gentlemen, to make a decision that we can all live with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary Helm.
This is my name. You can bear with me and follow through as quick as I can.
Yeah, please. Keep it to just a few minutes. Thank you.
I'll try to keep it as quick as I can. Hopefully I can get as long as that in. My name's Gary Helm. I own the property at 455 Carl Meeks Road. With regards to this track and the whole Airbnb issue, there's 2 separate properties out there. The Airbnb is on a separate deeded property than the track. Now, and I know in Pender County, if you would put a camper on a piece of property without a home, they'd make you move it, even if it was next door to your property that had a home. So I think the same rules apply here. And I strongly oppose the fact that they're saying it's amenity to the property. It's a separate property. This is a professional, sorry, I'm a little nervous, I'm a little bit upset too. This is a professional motorcycle track over there. If you would see it, jumps. I mean, they're enormous. The place is not gated, it's not fenced, anybody can ride in there. They purchased another home up the road and are renting it out. Those people come over every day and ride it. I've got them on video coming out of their driveway, going down the road, and riding in there. There's campers there at least once or twice a month. I've sent Daniel pictures of every one of them. If you go through this shows the 2 properties that are separate. So that's my first thing. The second thing is, as far as this being an Airbnb, when they registered this with the Secretary of State and the LLC, it lists it as an event site. That's what they're maintaining. Here's a flyer from the Rocky Point gravel grinder they were going to put on. And they're selling lunch or brunch for $15, camping $10. To me, that's commercial activity. Once this got out, they took it down. If you go to their Airbnb page, it says there are 3 separate structures, and we are able to accommodate up to 10 guests. This is in a 3-bedroom double wide for the home, and up to 100 plus for events at the barn. To me, that they should have a special use permit to have an event. They say only owners and several friends ride. There's people there every day. They're not just renting it out. They hear detached barns host large events, bands, rustic weddings, parties, separate fee. If this is not commercial use, I don't know what is. And then here's their training program with the MX, which you all seen. And it tells all about the home and everything else. Now, if you go to the determination of a prohibited noise in Pender County, it's any noise of such character, intensity, or duration that is detrimental or to interfere with the life and health and comfort of any of the citizens of the county. They've also included the state noise ordinance. It lists the decibels, which in our area, in any public area, as the road or a residence, during the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., they cannot exceed 60 decibels. On the very last page, there's an article we pulled where motocross bikes at a distance of 200 feet are from 90 to 110 decibels. That's one bike. They have 10, 12, 15. Go look on YouTube. Look at the videos. They're all over the place. They're so loud that you can't sit outside and have a conversation. And then here I included the Residential Property and Owners Association disclosure statement. If we were to put our property for sale, we would have to list that there's a noise issue, which is going to limit the sale of our property at the very least and probably impact the price. So, today that's just what I want to get to you guys about this. So they are not telling all the truths here. I'm sorry, I don't want to call anybody a liar, but maybe they see it one way, but we see it every day. They don't live here. They live in Wilmington. We're out there. I go to my farm every day, feed my animals. I had to move my cows, my pregnant cows, because of the noise. They weren't calving. I could play you, if you want to hear an audio, I played it for the county commissioners at their meeting. It's in the middle of my 47 acres, way away from them. It's so loud, it's intolerable.
Okay. Thank you,
But
sir, very much.
there's enough evidence here that they're running a commercial business, and it hasn't slowed down. It's every day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm constrained at this point to say, this is not an SUP, it isn't, is there a commercial business, was there a commercial business operating, and is that permitted or not? Not, some of those other issues. Again, there's no evidence that events were held. It was listed there. And whether this would be permitted, there are, and Daniel may better speak to this, but, and again, I don't know if there's a farm status here or not, but as to whether it would be, there's a state law that basically allows farm event venues to override local zoning.
Mhm.
So, but again, that's not the issue before the board, to address it.
Well, in that sense, with some of the evidence presented, I'd like to ask the appellant, under oath, specifically a question: was there a Rocky Point gravel grinder and 5K trail run held on Sunday, April 2nd, 2023?
Oh, they'd stated that.
Okay. I think you can just answer that question.
We're gonna put on the bottle when you're done. If you want
Okay.
to do it now, we can do that.
Okay, no,
No,
that's
we'll
fine.
wait when you come back up.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Scott Kenny?
May I make a remark?
Sir, the next gentleman speaking right at the moment, thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
Scott Tenney, 370 North Holly Shelter Estate Road. I've got about 50 or 60 acres there adjacent to them. Only separation is a creek. I've tried to communicate with them. I've never met them really in person other than a few times up there helping them. When they had a piece of machinery stuck or something like that, I've tried to be a good neighbor. But it's just never ending. They say they're gonna do one thing, they do another. You know, for them to try and say that they didn't know about the Driven MX is so far from the truth, it's unbelievable. They knew what was going on. We let them know that it was going on. I've communicated. They said, oh, it won't happen again. Well, it keeps happening again. I mean, we've already had it several occasions. Another problem that I have with this, and it quite honestly I think is the reason it's made it this far, is of who he is. And I'm not against that. I grew up, I've got, my two brothers are attorneys. Their father was a Superior Court judge for years. I understand and I appreciate the service he does, but it is very concerning that he has such the power and knows everybody. I mean, he clearly.
I'm not object to this. This is going way outside the bounds, totally unacceptable.
Sir, I mean, the issue is the appeal that was filed there, not, and.
The issue that I have with it is it's very obvious that he has a prior relationship with every member of this board. And to me, that's a conflict of interest.
I will tell you, as a member of this board, I know 0 of those people. So that accusation,
I've never talked to
I don't know any of them.
I've never talked to anybody in this room.
I think as long as the issues come up, I'd like to address it just out of transparency. I have heard that as a practicing attorney in New Hanover County, which I'm no longer, I'm now a somewhat demented retired lawyer in inactive standing. But I've heard the name Chad Hogston because I've seen the advertising of other lawyers. I don't know that I've ever seen him in person before any more than anybody else, and I've never talked with him in my life as far as I know. If that's a lie, it's because of my demented memory and not any intent on my part. But I think we're trying to deal with this in a straightforward way, and I don't know, I understand that sometimes politics can have influence on commissioners and such. I have no reason to think that's the case. In this board, we've made every effort we can to be as independent as we can be.
Well, and sir, again, because that also, you say everybody, and I'm not on the board, but I've appeared before, and I'll go ahead and say it, Judge Hogston had not influencing anybody, and I'll address that at the end. He's ruled against me both times. He doesn't remember it, I'm sure. But so, no, I'm just saying, it was, that is just not the case. And if you'll go back to why we're here, it's because Mr. Adams issued a notice of violation, and then there was an appeal. So I don't know how you're saying there's something going on when the county was proceeding, and now, as is their right, they've appealed. But that's for the board, and again, and we'll again address some of that. But I mean, these board members, if they have a conflict, they bring it up, and so there's. But if you want, we can ask. I'll ask any member of the board have any personal or professional relationship with any of the owners in this case.
No.
No. And we read through the statement this morning.
Right, but I just wanted to get it for the record. So okay, that we need to move on, sir.
Okay, and on another note, back to the Driven MX. I mean, I think Tom spoke that he was unaware that they were running an operation, and then Chad got up and said quite the contrary. I mean, it was obvious that it was. There's just it's never ending. I don't know how to prove it. It shouldn't be our duty to prove it. That should fall to the county. That's what I was under the impression that our tax dollars would do. I am the president of the HOA. You mentioned Holly Shelter Estates. We've got around 40 pieces of individual property owners down there, and probably 20 houses. In speaking with everybody, it's overwhelming consensus is it's becoming an issue. And we don't know, I don't know if this is the time or the place for it, but it has been an issue and it still remains an issue. I do have a video I'd like to play. I don't know if relevant. If you don't wanna hear it, I understand, of the sound. And I mean, this is from my home that's probably a half a mile from there. I get people that live across the river that call me and say, what in the world is going on over there? And that's a regular basis. So I don't know how to handle it. If this isn't the time or place, then I would appreciate it if somebody would tell me the time or the place to do it, because this is nowhere near the way it should be in a country, relaxed setting. I've been told by the property owners that it was out in the middle of nowhere and, it shouldn't be a problem. Well, it's not out in the middle of nowhere. We're 30 minutes from Wilmington. The area is growing. I've got 50 acres there. I've got almost $1 million in my place. This is not a cheap little double wide trailer that I live in. This is a real home, and it's where I'm trying to raise my kids, and that's being impacted, and I feel like it should be addressed by the county.
Thank you very
I guess
much.
that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Maybe, can't tell the first name, Rick Ezel.
Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Carl Ezel, 220 Holly Shelter, Carl Meeks Road. Chad's land joins mine. It was all one piece, and my mama divided it and cut it in half, and trespassing is a thing, and he put up signs. I put up signs on both sides, but people from out of town, they don't care, because they're not going to be there long. They trespass, and it's just loud noises all the time. It does create a problem, and I stay right across the creek, and it gets real loud. And a lot of people have lived there. I've been there 60 years, but a lot of people have been there 25, 30 years, some of them, and it was peaceful. And then just like a bombshell, right in the middle comes a trap. Y'all wouldn't like it. Now, what can be done about it, I don't know, but they tried to keep it under control a little bit, but it gets out of hand, and that's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir, very much.
Scott Walker.
I don't have a whole lot of copies, but.
Mr. Attorney, I would like to, looking through the thing, I do know Mr. Hackman, who's on the ownership, but I haven't spoken with him in probably 10 years, and we may be Facebook friends. That's all.
Would it in any way influence your
No.
decision?
Understood, yeah.
While he's passing those papers out, I would like to invite you, either, any of you, or all of you, to come out and sit on my front porch and see what goes on across the street. It's an open invitation, anytime you want.
Please do.
Does that include the wine, sir?
I got some good rock.
Let's go back to the motion.
And they even give you a glass of wine.
Understood, thank you.
I'm Scott Walker.
Your address, please, Scott?
I live in Hampstead, but I own property directly next to the track at 5049 Shaw Highway. I'd like to just go from the beginning of what I am doing out there. My wife and I, during COVID, were looking for property to board our horses and eventually turn into a small horse farm. We ended up finding the old sand mine, which was the perfect size, very far away from any homes except for Bill's now, because he built out there, but he don't mind horses. We have just under 47 acres. Multiple spots along our property are within 200, some places 150 feet of their property, even though we are separated by Carl Rivers' property. His runs directly between us. It's kind of a narrow piece of land. When we went out there to look at this land, it was very quiet. It was the perfect setting for a horse farm, which falls under agriculture, and horseback riding is not only permitted, but from what I can tell, it's encouraged in Pender County. So we looked at one of the lots. We ended up buying 6 of them because we decided that one wasn't enough. If someone bought a lot next to us and built a home, they probably wouldn't want our horses that close to their house. We literally refinanced our house to buy this property, to like go after a dream of ours, to have a horse farm, have a nice place to come and hang out with the family, and eventually build a home. That was in October 2020 when we bought it. I'd like to note that they bought their motocross property in February of 2021, which was not a motocross track yet. I actually thought when they purchased the property, I was told by Chad, I don't know if I ever spoke to Tom, a couple other guys, that they're building jogging trails through the woods, okay? Jogging trails. If you could understand my frustrations and going over there on July 31st and seeing a motocross track built, July 31st, 2021, because I don't like to trespass on other people's land. I don't know what they're doing over there. I just figure they're building jogging trails. And I like motocross. I like dirt bikes. I think they're great. Do I want them riding next to my horses? No. Do you want them next to your house? Probably not. At first, we were very friendly. I thought I got along well with Chad. Colin, he's a great guy. I got along with him really well. We had mutual friends, mutual interests. It was a neat neighborhood setting there. At first, it was a nice area, nice neighborhood setting, occasional dirt bikes. That occasional dirt bike ramped up. I mean, the amount of riding went from a couple bikes here and there to just almost all day, every day for a little while. We at one point let them ride on our trails. We had to shut that down because of multiple encounters with horses. Let me remind you, I've had my horses out there since within weeks of buying the property. I brought my horses out there, set up fenced-in areas for them, created run-ins. I spent thousands of dollars on trying to get pasture grass to grow, put up fencing, not to mention having to try to fence off as much of my property as I can to stop random strangers from trespassing. Honestly, it had never been them. They weren't ever the problem. It was always people that were just over there riding the dirt bikes. I mean, it's extremely loud, and they get bored and just come wander over onto our land. It's just like an open invitation because there's a driveway, I guess. This first page here, I've got a few text message interactions with me and Chad, which for the most part have always been friendly, respectful. Hey man, guy's doing donuts all over my yard. Can you tell him to stop? Hey, someone just ripped through the grass field I'm trying to grow. Just ask him to stop. He listened and he did stop them, but it would happen again the next day or a couple days later. The second page here, the last time I texted Chad about someone trespassing, we had 5 people coming out to ride horses. We had a couple people from a local equestrian club coming to ride the trails. We had people leasing our horses that day. 5 horses on our property, that's a lot of activity. And horses are very easily scared. I texted my neighbor because he had told me the day before there was people riding up and down our driveway, which let me explain, like our main driveway is 2,000 feet from this racetrack. I mean, every bit of 2,000 feet. I mean, they're going way out of their way to come over here. So he told me they were on the driveway. I texted Chad. I texted my neighbor that day. He said, yeah, they're out here again. They're riding still. I texted Chad, asked him, hey man, get your renters in check. At this point, I found out they had an Airbnb or whatever. I don't care. You want to make money? Not my problem. Please get your people in check. They're riding up and down my trails. I've got horse riders coming out there. I mean, 1 horseback rider alone can get injured with some dirt bikes. 5, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. His response was, I don't have renters, call the police. Like, I don't know who else is riding up and down my driveway with full motocross gear on, but I promise you it's not Bill or my other neighbor. I mean, it's obvious they're coming over from there, and that's not taking responsibility for the people that are clearly renting your house and riding your dirt bike track. I couldn't believe that was his response. I had never called the police on anybody in my life. And I'm like, I'm not calling the police on these guys, that's ridiculous. I said, okay, well, if you want it to be like that, thanks a lot, whatever. On my way home that day, I drove over there to the Airbnb, and those bikes were parked in the driveway with 2 trucks. I mean, it's like the frustration at this point started really increasing. I mean, just, it's absurd. I mean, like, to tell me to call the police, like, I shouldn't have to call the cops every single time a dirt bike comes down my driveway, which is a lot. They just shouldn't be over there. And the noise is one thing. The nuisance is insane. It's all day when they're riding. It's very loud, but that's not even the real issue for me. And the whole like, is this commercial? If it's commercial, what difference does it make as far as how it's affecting the neighbors? I mean, the only thing the county cares about is if they're collecting money. I mean, this is, I compare it to like, you know, all of us here probably like drag racing, NHRA Top Fuel drag racing. Okay, so I've got 47 acres, that's plenty of land to make a 1/4 mile drag strip, literally. Our driveway is a 1/2 mile long. If I built a Top Fuel drag strip on my driveway and only my neighbors brought their Top Fuel cars to run it, and I didn't charge them anything, it's fine? I don't think it is. I think that the Airbnb is this weird loophole, which again, I don't care about you making money, but it's just like, this is like a ridiculous loophole for doing something they say they're not doing, but they are. And it started out as Chad and a couple of his friends riding dirt bikes, and it was fun. I mean, I have a dirt bike. I ride around my property occasionally. I don't invite 32 friends and ride all day, because that would make Bill hate me. So if you go down past the text messages, here's 6 different posts on Facebook that were posted by the owners of the track. Some of these have 2,000 or more shares. I mean, 3,000 shares. Like when this track was completed, it went from me essentially thinking that they were building a training facility for their son, which I really thought that's what it was, because their son is really into dirt bikes, to, I mean, 6,000 plus shares on Facebook, on social media. The way I found this was because one of my friends shared it. They never told us that this is what they were doing. They told us they were building jogging trails, and even when I did find the track, it was like, oh, well, I guess they maybe misled me a little bit. I never even said anything to them about it. I just, you know, I like to think people aren't trying to intentionally deceive their neighbors, but that's what it was. There's not a jogging trail on this whole property. Yeah, you can run over these tracks, and it would be silent, and nobody would be here today. You could have 500 people jog over those tracks, and I'd be willing to bet that this man wouldn't be able to hear it. But that's not what this is. I mean, this is advertising all over the internet for a motocross track that just happens to be an Airbnb. I mean, the technicality of if someone's renting the house, they can do whatever they want. I mean, like, so if I rented my house out next to my Top Fuel track, and the guys wanted to run their race cars from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., the county would be okay with that? I don't think so.
Well, and that may be a matter that would be taken up with a different group of people. We have to kind of stay focused here on what we're here to do, so I understand your point.
So if you go to the next pages here,
But you need to finish up your presentation, please.
you know, the whole no trespassing thing, this is in 30 days my game camera picked up 10 photos. These are all different people on different bikes. In 30 days, this is just one spot on the property. It's a driveway that me and Riv share that connects my property to his, and as you go down the driveway another maybe 500 yards, you eventually would get to the motocross track. That track, which is not blocked off by anything, because if you go to this page past, you know, if you go past the advertisements on Facebook and all that, the very last page here, there's a picture of cones which almost are never in front of the driveway. These guys on dirt bikes, I mean, like I was a kid, I still have fun on dirt bikes, and cones aren't going to stop a dirt bike. That's the equivalent of me going out to my beehives, which I lease land on the property, I let a beekeeper keep hives out there. It'd be like putting a chain link fence around the beehives and saying like, don't worry, they won't get you. I mean, that's like the equivalent of putting cones up. There's no real structure. Me and my wife have spent more money than we should on no trespassing signs, putting up rope fencing, doing the best we can to keep people out, and they still come over. And if this was raw land that I just happened to own or maybe inherited and I went out there and occasionally fished on it or something, it would not matter. But we're trying to build a home out there eventually, and what really ended up setting me off was this track in the very back is less than 200 feet from our property. The property that we had perk tested, which is recorded and printed out here, the new track here, that's less than 200 feet from our property because the property in between us is so narrow. The property in between us also is property that we were debating on purchasing from Riv. We have no intent, we have no reason to buy that land anymore. And not only that, I've got a perk test that's basically useless because I'm not going to build a house next to a motocross track. If you look at the dates here, January 19th, the final notice was issued, you guys said. I just wrote that down. This photo was taken February 10th. It's flat. There's like a couple little trails. April 10th, there's like 5 massive jumps built. So you guys told them to stop doing whatever they were doing, and they just went and built more jumps. Not only that, but directly next to my property where I want to build a home. It's one of the few places on the land that perks. If that didn't perk test that day, we would have never bought the land because I had no intention of doing this without eventually moving out there. And I mean, you have to understand where I'm coming from here. I would have never bought the land if I would have known there was going to be a motocross track next door. I think motocross is cool, but I don't want to live next to it. I mean, just like I think a lot of things are cool, and I don't want to live next to it. Like Carowinds is fun, but do you want to live next to Carowinds? You know, like you could go on and on. I mean, it's the fact that you told them to stop and they kept building tracks. It's insane. And one very last thing I like to focus on, it's very short. This is a video.
We can't.
Mr. Chairman, I mean,
Yeah.
this
We
is
can't.
not,
Yeah.
this
Can't
has nothing to do
verify.
with the issue
We
before
can't
the
have
board.
to ask you
This
that.
is at 7 o'clock, between 7 and 7:30.
Yeah.
This is Chad and his people. This is the renters.
We
This
can't.
is 7:30 at night. This is taken from
Sir,
the property.
sir,
We
if
have to
it's,
ask you to turn it off, please.
yeah, if you're talking about the owner using his property, that, we're here about whether it's a commercial use or not.
Well, the truth is that the Airbnb is a loophole, and everybody knows it. Thank you.
Julie Walker?
Just gonna, hand everybody a copy of all the ordinances that have been violated, make your job a little easier and know them. And here's copies of text messages if you'd like to read them after I'm done speaking. I'm Julie Walker, 5049 Shaw Highway. I'm Scott's wife. I'm just going to speak briefly about our horse farm being so close to this property. I'm not going to touch on the noise ordinances or the nuisance aspect of this, as it's already been said by everybody. But I do want to remind you, a dirt bike is 100 decibels, and that is comparable to a rock concert. I would like to talk about the safety aspects of what's going on. I have 2 horses out there currently. This dirt bike track has just created a huge safety for myself, my family, and riders that come out to use my horses. This is from trespassing as well as the loud, fast-moving noise that comes from the riders on the track. Regarding trespassing, we've lined our property perimeters near their track with bright yellow paint on the trees, dozens and dozens of no trespassing signs and more. The owners of the Airbnb and track, they spoke about creating barriers. I think you were given a picture from Scott. The barriers are about 4 traffic cones, some caution tape that kind of drapes the ground, and just a few signs. So this is something that's very easily ridden around. But one of the issues is that, you know, these people that come out, they're on dirt bikes, and the owners, they really don't have enough land to satisfy all these people that come out to ride, so they constantly feel the need to trespass onto my property, Gary's property, River's property, and do things like wheelies up and down the night on up and down the road in the middle of the night on Carl Meeks Road. The use of the Airbnb, which attracts vacationers from all over North Carolina, as they said, surrounding states and a lot of eastern United States, is a large component of this issue. For these vacationers, they come out to ride the track, and once they get bored, they just want to explore. And for visitors coming from out of town, respecting their barriers has no use for them. My husband and I bought our land in November 2020. This was well prior to their arrival for the sole purpose of farming. And you can look at the last ordinance there. Farming is considered an essential aspect to Pender County, and it should be, supported. For 3 years, we've been building a horse farm with our spare time, which we plan to move to, like he said, board horses and continue providing trails rides to the public. The use of the track, allowing multiple bikes at a time, as I said, has already created multiple safety concerns. We've worked really hard to turn what was the sand mine by Dallas Harris into agricultural land use. We have over 3 miles of pasture, of trails, pasture, and we also have a forestry management plan in place. We turned it into a beautiful area for local, not people from eastern United States, local equestrians to enjoy. And shortly after I deliver, and we are a bona fide farm with our forestry management plan, we'll be bringing in more horses for board. I currently lease my personal horses to multiple people who do weekly trail rides on my property. And this is to cover expenses related to farming, as I own property in Hampstead and the area in Shaw Highway. This is not commercial what I'm doing, it's just in support of our farm and my personal horses. Anyways, they come out and ride my horses, and we also allow local equestrians to commute with their own horses to come out and use the trails, because as land development continues, there's nowhere really to ride. Just last year, I had a girl that was riding, she quit and said she felt so uncomfortable by all the dirt bikes that were out, that kept riding on our property, around our property, that she just didn't feel comfortable riding with us anymore. Though I do still have multiple people out riding weekly. The noise alone emitted from the bikes is a huge safety issue, being so close to our farm. And please note that we did make, I haven't spoken to anybody else, but we did make Chad well aware of what we were doing well before they purchased their property, as well as like what Scott said during that time. They were telling us about their jogging trails they were making. I personally have been thrown from my horse in relation to these dirt bikes. I have a very well-trained horse that was out jumping, have not had this issue before. He did a series of heel overhead bucks, probably 10 of them. This was immediately after a dirt bike had raced down a trail close to us on Carl River's property. And I have evidence via text messages of when I told Chad about this very early on. He acknowledged the safety concerns and apologized, but their barriers are still like 4 traffic cones. This was about a year ago. Sorry, I'm a little winded because I'm 35 weeks pregnant. Anyone on a horse with this track nearby is at risk for safety concerns. But keep in mind our farm was well in place before their track. You can also reference the Pender County Sheriff's Department. Deputies have had to come out on multiple occasions for issuing no trespassing warnings, as well as notifying the owners of their negligence to contain their riders. Trespassing is a weekly occurrence, and it is still an ongoing issue. The following are some facts about dangers pertaining to my horses and the noise alone.
Mr. Chairman, we have to keep this on.
Yeah,
We've allowed.
that's really not relevant to the issues that we're speaking.
My horses?
Yeah,
No.
Okay.
sorry. We have to ask you to.
It's about the violation.
Okay.
And the
On a
appeal.
different note, in their appeal letter to the county, they state they are not collecting any money for the track. As he said earlier, if you look at if you compare local properties on Airbnb and look up flexible dates, you're gonna see prices about $100 to $200 a night. I've got a printout, I think I must have handed it to one of you guys. High season rates, they're going for $626 a night. In February, January, $400 a night. The closest comparable comp that I could find regarding this was Old Homestead Farm for like $300 a night. That's a 3,500 square foot home on 100 acres. This is a double wide on Shaw Highway. So it's, like Scott said, it's an obvious loophole
Right.
for commercial use of this track.
Thank you very much, ma'am. You've finished now.
Can I finish?
Yeah, no, we have to move on. You've spoken.
Well, let me put it this way. There's been a lot of testimony, and let me just ask the attorney, only because I want to put it on him instead of me. If we were fined that this was a nuisance, do we have any jurisdiction to do anything about that?
No, sir.
Thank you. You're giving us a lot of testimony that is basically going right over our head because we're a limited body. We're here to determine if their appeal is to be granted. And I'll tell you frankly, I think their defense is, gosh, we're not doing that anymore. And I'm hoping that that's true. There's been testimony that maybe it's not true. That's also a little irrelevant too. The point was that they were in violation as far as I can tell from all the testimony. I'm going to move as soon as we have the opportunity to do so to deny the appeal because in fact the planning department was correct, I believe, that there was a violation at that time. And if there are future violations, I would expect the planning department, if they get wind of it, and it may be difficult to tell if people who park out there who are not staying at the Airbnb are paying any kind of rent, but that's a factual question that I can't determine. I'm not sure how well the planning department will be able to do that, but that's their job, not mine. My job would be to decide if this appeal's valid, and I can't see anything about the appeal that's valid. At the same time, I can't do anything about whether I believe you about the safety of horses or the nuisance value of the noise. If it doesn't violate the noise ordinance in the county, I don't think we have any authority to do anything about that, as the attorney has said. So that's the reason we're cutting you off, so to speak, is simply that we're trying to get to the issues that we can do something about. And at this point, I haven't heard anything about the appeal that says we weren't doing that at the time the planning department wrote the letter. And consequently, I'm just waiting to move to deny the appeal.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody else signed up?
Yes, sir. Miles Belek. I looked you up on the internet, sir.
Oh, well, nice. Hi, my name is Miles Belek. I live at 129 Turtle Hill Trail in Bender County. My association is my wife and I lease Julie and Scott's 2 horses for once a week riding. We did have it planned to end this period of the lease this past April, just due to the heat. My wife has a condition, makes it a little bit tough to go out and ride. I will mention, and to your point, sir, I understand, riding horses is not what's at issue here. The issue is whether or not there's a commercial business operating. But I will tell you, I'm a very novice rider. Julie has a horse that's perfect for me. It's a little Mustang. I have 2 goals when I get on a horse. Number 1 is to get on the horse facing the right direction. And number 2 is to get off the horse at a point of my choosing. There have been numerous times I've been out riding the trails where riding down a trail, a dirt bike comes up, that horse spooks, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling for somebody with my riding skills. To the point the attorney made, I would be curious to know with any of the Airbnb rentals, if any of the people who have rented via Airbnb have not taken advantage of the tracks. If anyone anyone just rented it to go out there and spend a couple of nights and enjoy it, or is every renter through the Airbnb renting it because of the ability to use those tracks? The other thing I would ask a question on, which someone also brought up, which I think is probably significant, the home sits on a separate parcel from the parcels that have been developed into a motocross track. Are those really associated amenities? That's it.
Thank you very much, sir.
Those are all the sign-ups,
That's it?
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Anyone else wish to speak or sign up to speak? All right.
I think Mr. Potter wanted to have a.
Yeah, I'm
opportunity.
just gonna get back to him, okay. Mr. Potter?
Thank you, and Mr. Olson, this is entirely directed at your statement a second ago. And I don't think I'm gonna convince you otherwise, but Mr. Adams, if I may.
Yeah.
Do you have any evidence that the people who rented through Driven MX were not staying at the property while they were using the trails?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clifford, do you wanna come up and provide your retort?
Wait a second, before, I'd rather have the attorney still up there. Does it make any difference whether they're staying there or not if in fact the person you've rented to is operating a commercial by charging a commercial operation using your property by charging folks to show up and be taught how to ride dirt bikes? I don't think it makes any difference at all. Would it be okay if I rented the place in my nuclear waste facility company were to rent your place for a couple of weeks? We only need it for a couple of weeks. We can probably dig a hole, put our waste away, and move on and never come back. Would that be okay?
No, of course not, because it
Yes.
violates the law.
And I think that if somebody rents it and says, we're gonna open up a wholesale car parts, a business here for 2 weeks and sell all this car parts and let people come in and park around and come in and sort through, would that be okay? I don't think this is any different. It's, if you were renting to a commercial operation, then that's not an allowed use. It doesn't matter whether they're renting from you, whether they own the property, or whether they're renting from someone who's renting from you.
I think, unless I'm misunderstanding the county's position, that there is a distinction there, because as long as the use is ancillary to staying in the house, that is not a commercial use under the Pender County zoning ordinances. That's a distinction that has a difference. It's not nuclear waste or car parts businesses. It's
Okay,
people
so
paying-
let's say
it's a
you've got your
sublease, essentially.
Airbnb and it's got a beautiful swimming pool.
Yep.
We all would like to rent an Airbnb and swim in the beautiful swimming pool. But if we get there and we find out that you're renting out the swimming pool and the lifeguard to the company that's renting the Airbnb is letting other folks then come in and use the swimming pool for 50 cents a dive or $2 a lap or whatever, isn't that a commercial operation? And how is that any different from what your motocross was at that time?
Because, again, I don't think there's anything in the record about what Driven MX was actually charging or how they were charging.
Yes,
or
there
if
is,
they were
sir.
charging.
Yes, sir, sir. Page 14, it says training program, week-long training, Monday through Thursday, cost $600 per person. Friday
Right.
through Sunday, $450. Daily training, $150, which, per the UDO, fee-supported, athletic, recreation, blah, blah,
That's-
blah. But that's a commercial operation, that
Mr.
there's a
Keeler,
profit.
that's not admissible evidence. There's nobody here to testify that that actually happened.
Well, Ms. Potter.
It's not
I've got
material
no, Ms.
competent
Potter,
evidence.
please. Your client testified they were running camps for kids.
That's correct.
So they're saying they're charging, they're saying they're running camps for kids, that crosses it over. That's not just people that are staying there using it. A camp, and if you're doing a camp, and maybe they're staying there, maybe they're not, but they weren't the renters. They were paying, it was a commercial transaction for them to do that. But we're just gonna agree to disagree, so I mean, I think
it's
that's
a legal distinction, right?
Pardon?
It's a legal distinction.
Well, but again, I think to me, that, anyway, and there's evidence and it's quasi-judicial, so the board is free to, they're not and the statute itself says, they're not held to the same evidentiary standards as is a court.
Agreed. We talked about this before.
Yeah.
And we disagree.
Respectfully.
Respectfully. Of course. Mr. Clifford.
you guys have any questions for me right now?
No, do you have something else to offer?
I was just gonna address the opposition, so.
I think that'd be fine.
Yeah, just appropriately. First of all, we do want to be good neighbors to you guys. We are working hard to limit our renters and respect the horse farm, respect the neighborhood. I know this is not what this is about, but I'm a person, a business owner in Wilmington. I'm also a neighbor. I get it. I would just like cordial conversation moving forward. We have had cordial conversation in December with Mr. Tinney, and we explained to him, now we didn't, for the record, talk to every neighbor, but we explained to Mr. Tinney, who we thought kind of spoke for the neighborhood, that we were going to fulfill the rentals through May. So some of your accusations of a lot of people in and out are true. There were a lot of people in and out. But all that now is going to be either split in half or be very limited out of all due respect for you. Also, the 5K and the gravel grinder was an event, and we did hold it last year. I hold an event on private property in Pender County and other places. I work with Tommy Batson, who gives me approval to do those every year. I asked for permission from Tommy Batson to do those events, and he put his stamp of approval on it, the same thing we've always done. This year, out of due respect for you, we did not hold that event so that we would not disrupt the road and have 200-300 people come. We did not want to do that. We also didn't want to do anything against the Pender County letter that was sent. So everything moving forward, as Chad said, we're learning, and we don't want to be yelled at because we can't like negotiate that way. We just we offered a proposition to Mr. Tinney and said, what can we do better for you? And we received a response, I don't know. And so moving forward, we've on our own made our own adjustments. All right, let's do 10 to 5. Let's split our rentals in half. And the reason why the rental fee was up was so people would not rent it over the summer. And all of July and almost all of August, it's not rented because we increased the fees on purpose so it wouldn't be rented. And that's what's happened. So just for the record, moving forward, my phone's always on, always up for a cup of coffee. Thanks. Can I answer his question?
Outside.
Correct.
They rode down the driveway the other day, I asked them where they're going to go to the track. Do you have permission to be there? Yes. They ride every day.
They're brand new. They just moved in. We will have a conversation with them, and they will stay within the hours that we have posted.
Any other?
It is not open to the public. It is private property, and they have to ask permission. So it's not open to the public. We'll do a better job putting more signage up. That costs money, we'll put it in, we'll do it. I know that's not the issue at hand here, just wanted to address because this is obviously a contentious situation and we want to work this out cordially as adults. Any questions from the board?
No. Mr. Potter, you said that your client had something they wanted to discuss?
Not sure, I want to make sure the names are, I know Mr. Olson because he's a practicing lawyer in Wilmington, but Mr. Kipfer, is that correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Brewer, you're the chair and the planning, or the county manager for Observe City, right?
Town manager. yes.
Town manager, sorry, not county manager. I just wanted to make sure I knew who everybody was. So in all honesty, Mr. Thurman and Mr. Adams and I have been trying to work towards a set of rules that we would voluntarily place on the property and a set of enforcement mechanisms that you all don't have the power to impose on us unilaterally. In other words, they can't be imposed on us under your power. And we came here prepared to offer those today. But one thing has become extremely clear to us. It's been said to me multiple times by the audience, is this is not over. They've said it to me. They've said every time I've said objection, they've said something. Our hope was that if we came here today and put a set of rules and regulations on the table that would be enforceable by planning, or I'm sorry, by zoning, that would resolve this. But quite frankly, I don't see that it is, and I've been talking with my client about whether we want to propose them or not. And I think at this point, we do not. And I apologize to Mr. Thurman. When we talked this morning, that was the intention. This isn't about commercial operation. This is about noise and nuisances, and that's not going to go away under our proposal. We're not going to propose to not run motorcycles on the tracks, and that's the problem. It's not anything other than that. So unless my client looks at me and shakes his head no, that's where we are. And so I apologize, Mr. Kipfer, Mr. Brewer, and the rest of the members. We really hope to come forward with a proposal to you all today that would have a lasting impact on this situation, but I don't think it's going to make any difference. We're just giving without sort of having a reciprocal give back, so to speak, if that makes sense. And I'm happy to answer any questions. If you want to ask questions about what we were going to propose, we could do that. Not trying to be coy about it, but.
Thank you, Mr. Starr.
Mr. Brewer, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
No, I don't, no.
Okay, you said something earlier about, I'm sure if that got covered in the.
Yeah, I think so. Every question I had
Okay.
was answered, but yeah.
So the issue is still whether this is a commercial, the use of the dirt track is a commercial.
Well, the issue before you is whether the administrator made a correct determination that at the time the violation was given, there was a commercial operation. And as I said, part of that is you can't say, all right, I've been operating it for 364 days. Today I'm not commercial. And then, okay, that's not, again, that the determination that was made by the administrator at the time that there was a commercial operation
So-
and issued a notice of violation. Because we haven't, again, proceeded with any of the, what normally would have been done of, okay, what are we gonna do? You're gonna stop doing it commercial.
So what they're doing today may be irrelevant to what we're doing now.
Right, because you're looking at what they were
We're looking
doing
at
at
what
the
they were doing in
time
the past.
the violation was issued.
January
Yes.
18th,
Right,
19th.
now that what's
Mr.
that?
Chairman, don't we have to close public hearing and go into discussion?
Yeah, well, yeah. Are we
But I mean,
done?
again, I think it's, if you wanna ask any other information from anybody
Right, so I
before
was
we do
just
that,
kind
yes.
of checking through of that. Do we have any other questions we'd like to ask of anybody? You want to hear any further testimony? Okay, then we'll close the testimony, close the hearing for discussion.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Mr. Olson that Mr. Hogston testified that in that 2-week period, January, second week of January, third week in January, one of the operators was renting, and then through what was posted on their website, they were operating a commercial operation. Whether or not people were staying there was through the UDO, and my interpretation, this was being used, and it may be a secondary usage with Airbnb, but there was athletic training, recreation with supervised athlete or recreational activities. So I believe that the code enforcement officer was correct in his issuance of a violation
At that time.
at that time.
Yeah.
I have one more remark.
Sir, we're closed. Sir, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, everything we heard today, and for the people sitting out here, yeah, I know there's noise out there. I know there's dust out there, but that's not why we're here today. Our attorney, he was very clear, was the business run as a commercial business? That's what we're looking at. We're not looking at it, we can't look at, does it make noise? And I think you guys have to understand that. That is not why we're here today. And if there's a business out there, they are recruiting people, they are actually getting paid by somebody to run a business. I agree with Brent. In my opinion, yes, I think they were correct in issuing that it's being run as a commercial business.
Yeah, I tend to agree. At the time, what may be happening now might be very different than what was happening then, and I hope that is the case. I would also tell you that you have a problem. From all the testimony I've heard, there are a lot of things going on there that need to be addressed, because I don't think this matter will go away either, unless some of those issues are obviously very much addressed. Trespassing seems to be a huge issue. Illegal use of the track. I understand you have a right to the dirt bikes and they have a right to ride horses. Somehow you gotta figure out how that's gonna work, because otherwise this will continue. And I don't see that as very, I don't see a positive outcome in that scenario. So somehow that's gotta work. Hopefully you're not using it as a commercial enterprise. Unfortunately, fortunately, noise is after 11 p.m. So I think we find ourselves in a very interesting position, but I definitely would encourage more communication between all the parties to try to get to some kind of resolution here. Everyone has their rights, but we shouldn't be abusing the rights. And if we have responsibility for people on our site, we should do the best we can to take that matter in hand and deal with it. So I'll let anyone else speak that needs to at this point.
I don't have anything. I think my colleagues have summed it up. I don't have anything else. I have my own.
Mr. Olson, anything else?
Make a motion.
Okay, well, that's what
I find that there's sufficient evidence in the record to support the planning department's decision. I move to dismiss the appeal.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? 0. Appeals is denied.
Mr. Chairman, may I address the public just very briefly?
You very much can.
Ladies and gentlemen, the result here is that the determination that there was a commercial operation, at the time, is that appeal has been denied. The owners have a right. They can appeal that to Superior Court. They can, again, contend as moving forward they are no longer conducting commercial activities, which, again, that is all that the violation was for. And let me address a couple of things. We have no ability to control trespassing. That goes to the sheriff's department. Or that goes to, and I cannot give you legal advice. I am prohibited by the state bar from doing so. But all I could say is you may wish to consult with an attorney as to whether you want to look at some action there. And I take no position. Everybody has property rights. And so that would be for you to, if you chose to consult with an attorney. That's the only advice I can give you there. There is the noise ordinance, which also is enforced by the sheriff's department. If you feel that is inadequate, under the First Amendment to our Constitution, you have the right to petition your elected officials for redress. For instance, there was an amendment at one point about amplified music. The best example of that was we had somebody that liked to play his stereo loud enough that he could hear it over his lawnmower as he was cutting his grass. That obviously caused issues for the neighbors, and that was one of the motivations that is separate than other items under the noise ordinance. Whether you choose to do so, and again, I take no position on that. It's not my place to do so. But I'm just saying you have other alternatives, but we don't have the ability, and this board doesn't have the ability to close that facility. And I will tell you, people have the right to ride dirt bikes on their property. They do so all over the county. And so that's going to be there, and we've heard you, but this isn't the forum that can resolve it. And you may wish to, as I say, consult. You may have some civil options that you may wish to consider. And sir, I believe you said there's an HOA out there. The HOA may wish to look into that. And I'm not trying to get the Lawyers Full Employment Act, because it won't come to me and I won't be involved with it in any event. But I'm just saying that may be something you need to look at if you choose to, because there's at the end of some day, they will still be allowed, as anybody else is, to ride motorbikes on their own property. That's just the way as things stand right now in Pender County. That is the way it will be. And we will proceed, and we'll have to evaluate with Daniel whether we believe we have evidence, and with Mr. Ring, whether there's evidence of commercial activity out there. And if there's not, then that ends our enforcement action at this point. Yeah, so let me, I don't want to hold the board up. I just want to do that. I will stay here, and I will answer any question from anybody as long as it takes. And, okay? I just don't want to hold my board up. They're not getting paid, so I gotta.
All right, do we have any other discussion items?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Thank Pender County and Mr. Adams for inviting the board to the quasi-judicial workshop put on by the School of Government last week. Mr. Kiffer and I were able to join, and it reaffirmed a lot of the things that that staff has instructed us and the county attorney, and then also with my time on Northern River County Board. And so it was nice, and it was good to see that, and with our peers around the county, and
Yeah, we
I
met
think
and
a lot of people
around the state.
State,
We met people on Board of Adjustments from other counties as well, and other municipalities.
So just want to say thank you, and the fact that it covered the cost of it, and
Yeah.
4 hours of things that most people wouldn't find interesting, and we were able to stay awake. So
Actually
thank you
compelling.
guys.
That was actually pretty compelling.
And just to follow up on that briefly, the Council of Governments made a presentation to the commissioners on Monday night, and the materials are on the agenda if you want to go look at it. They've got, I don't know, about 20 pages or so that Sam had.
Yeah, there were about 20 slides.
Yeah, that if you wanted to look at it, any of you weren't able to attend, or, just as a follow-up to see some of that. And some of it doesn't apply, but the quasi-judicial part obviously does.
Yeah.
One other, are you gonna raise it, Daniel, about meeting time?
So just for context, and thank you for reminding me, Trey, this board right now is 3 full members and 2 alternates. We received an application for another position on the board, and historically this board has been represented by a member of each commissioner district. And now I don't know that that's codified anywhere in the rules, but historically that's how it's operated. And so we received an application from a gentleman in Hampstead who lives in Hampstead to serve as an alternate on this board. And when it was brought before the Board of Commissioners for their consideration for an appointment, they voiced concern about the board being made up of too many folks from one side of the county, and not having representation from each of the commissioner districts. And the conversation, essentially, the point that I made, or I tried to make, was that we would love to get applications from folks of all districts, but we just have not received any applications, and we've tried and have not been successful in that attempt. And one of the suggestions from the board was perhaps folks are not able to attend the meetings because they happen during a weekday at 9 a.m. So there was a point made to bring up to the board if there would be another time that the board would prefer to meet.
And with all due respect, certainly of our governing board, we've had members from other areas of the county serve on the board and then not show up to meetings or resign. So, again, I think it's a double-edged sword when we go down this path. I've made my feelings clear on this, variances and, other cases. I know Mr. Brett down there, he's voiced his concerns about it too, but I think it's going to be tough either way. And I think again, we go back to the age-old adage of changing meeting times to solicit more input. Well, people are going to come if they're interested. They're not going to come if they're not interested. It doesn't matter the time of the meeting. So those are just my comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we discussed this, I brought it up in November just because 9 o'clock for younger working people, not in real estate, not self-employed, it makes it very difficult. But to what Mr. Brewer says, if people want to make it, I make it every Wednesday at 9 o'clock, and I block off that. It's something that I have to do as a civic duty, as well as I tell the people that I work with, they work around it, and I work around it. So, but it's just because I'm interested and I want to be involved. Other people may not have that flexibility due to obligations to pay the bills.
Sure.
So I mean, I brought up about 3 o'clock. So to respect the staff's time and keep it within business hours, because I know you have enough evening time, but I know Mr. Brewer had some conflicts with that. So, I mean, I agree with the fact that if people want to make the effort, they'll make the effort, just like Mr. Olson drives in sometimes when he's out of town to
Right.
make these things. People will do it if they want to do it. If they don't want to do it,
I think
you make a priority what you're going to make a
I
priority
agree,
of.
and I think a challenge of an afternoon meeting, once your day starts, you have an idea of where it's gonna go, but by noon, it's changed.
Yes, sir.
So you have great intentions to come at 3 o'clock, but if something has occurred, usually I can get out of bed, and before anything really happens, I'm here. Then I can look at my phone and go, okay, I see what I'm missing, but it's too late, I'm already here.
Right.
So I'll get to that when I get done, as opposed to me making a priority decision that I've got a meeting coming up or I don't.
Right.
And so, I'm with everybody here, I
Yeah,
think.
and when I sat on New Hanover County, we had it at 5:30 or 6, and that was because it was close enough to the end of the workday and right outside, so that those conflicts within the regular working day of things that come up.
Right.
But I mean, ultimately, it's at the purview of the commissioners if they,
Oh, yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the
so,
feedback.
yeah, I think we need to kind of stay in the same time frame.
Sounds good. And just as a disclaimer, if you know of anyone in District 4 or 5, which is West Pender County or the Burgall area, who might be interested, I'd be happy to give them a call and talk to them about some of the responsibilities of the board and commitment and things of that nature. So just keep that in mind, please. Thank you.
I think you guys are in that district, aren't you?
I think
No, they're Rocky Point, I think.
All right, so our next meeting would be the 21st of June, is that correct? Do we have anything on the,
Yes, sir. We will have an appeal of administrative decision on June 21st as well.
okay,
And I've stated to Mr. Adams I will not be able to be
you won't be here on Wednesday, okay.
I don't foresee any conflicts.
I don't see any conflicts at this point on my schedule. All right,
And just to verify, is the board comfortable with that meeting being in Burgall, here, this location? Okay.
unless we're gonna have,
School will be out, it'll be a lot easier to get here.
yeah.
Why is it going to be? Is there going to be a bigger
Big meeting,
audience?
Big issue, big audience?
I don't know that there will be or not. I just want to be sure. And
No, I think we're fine.
like, for example, at planning board, we normally, at the meeting, say in May, we say, okay, well, in June, just to be sure everybody's aware, we're going to be meeting in Burgall or we're going to be meeting in Hampstead. So I just want to be clear that the plan is to meet here.
Well, I like my 12-minute drive. I don't know if these guys like their 40-minute drive.
I would love to attend that meeting, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, so we'll be here, in this location on, Wednesday, June 21st, 9
Right.
o'clock.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I have a motion, do I have a second to adjourn?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Adjourn.